Students, in this class we discuss the respiratory system up to excretory system. As we observe the previous EAMCET examination papers, from the respiratory system, circulatory system, excretory, nervous system, endocrine system, development of rabbit. From each topic we are getting 1 mark. Particularly in the respiratory system, regarding the structure of lungs, we are getting 1 question. And from the musculoskeletal system, from the respiratory system, circulatory system, excretory system, musculoskeletal system, reproductive system, nervous system, endocrine system. From these systems, from each system we are getting 1 question. Now as usual, while we are discussing the each and every question, regarding the each and every question we have to discuss some important points. First of all, we have to discuss the respiratory system. Now as we observe the respiratory system, in case of reptiles, aves, mammals, in these 3 animals, in the embryonic stage, rudimentary gills are present. It means both in the embryonic and in the adult stage, what type of respiration is going to observe, we know that is pulmonary respiration. The pulmonary respiration is brought by pulmonary organs. What is the other name of pulmonary organs? The lungs. Now here we go a bit in depth. What are the vertebrates in which pulmonary respiration, pulmonary organs, pulmonary arteries, pulmonary veins first developed? Again I am repeating. What are the vertebrates in which pulmonary organs, pulmonary arteries, pulmonary veins, pulmonary respiration first developed? The answer is the dipnoi fishes. In dipnoi fishes, the air bladder acts as a lung. And now we have to discuss one by one question. Now we go for the first question. Pseudostratified epithelium. Regarding animal organization, we are having one idea. The pseudostratified epithelium is of 2 types. One is non-ciliated and ciliated. Now we are observing the question. The pseudostratified epithelium is present in the following respiratory tract parts. Now as we observe, this part we call it as the trachea. T means trachea. The trachea divides into, this indicates primary bronchi. They divide into the secondary bronchi. They divide into the tertiary bronchi. Now here the question is, pseudostratified ciliated epithelium is present in which part of the respiratory tract? Trachea, primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi. In these parts, pseudostratified epithelium with cilia present. Here, associated with ciliated pseudostratified epithelium, what type of cells are also present? The goblet cells. What is the function of goblet cells? They secrete the mucus. Now you observe the question and options. Pseudostratified ciliated epithelium present in the following respiratory tract parts. The nearest option is trachea and bronchi. This is trachea and these are the branches of bronchi. Primary, secondary, tertiary. Now we go for the next question. Movement of which ions occur first during chloride shift? where we have to discuss this point regarding the transportation of carbon dioxide. Now, this part we call it as plasma. That is one part of blood we know very well. And this one we call it as RBC. Now, as we observe the RBC, in case of mammals, the RBC biconcave and circular. The RBC is covered by plasma lemma, and this is the cytoplasm. In the cytoplasm, the water is present. Now, during bicarbonate formation, inside RBC, what is going to happen? The carbon dioxide combines with water. Now we are getting H2CO3. The H2CO3 dissociates into, this is the RBC. For our convenience, we are drawing the RBC. Now the H2CO3, this is unstable compound. The H2CO3 dissociates into H plus and HCO3 minus. Now during bicarbonate transportation from the RBC, HCO3 minus ions, the HCO3 minus ions, first of all from the RBC, they enter into plasma. Now in order to maintain the neutrality inside RBC, instead of HCO3 minus from the plasma, the Cl minus enters into RBC. That phenomena we call it as Amberger phenomena, and this is called the chloride shift. Now we observe the question. Movement of which ions occur first during the chloride shift? Now HCO3 minus ions move into plasma from RBC. Now first of all HCO3 minus enters into plasma. Then from plasma Cl minus enter into RBC. That is called chloride shift, explained by Hamburger. So here the answer is HCO3 minus ions move into the plasma from RBC. Now we go for the next question. Find out the correct statements with respect to respiratory part of nasal chamber. Now, as we observe the rabbit nasal chambers, now this is one nasal chamber and this is another nasal chamber. Now these two are separated by a nasal septum. I am giving the short words. This is NC nasal chamber. This is another nasal chamber. A longitudinal nasal chamber, another longitudinal nasal chamber. How many nasal chambers here? 2. Now the nasal chambers are separated by nasal septum. Now how many nasal septum? 1 in number. Now each nasal chamber divides into 3 parts. Now this is called vestibular part. Students, we know very well the name of the parts, so I am writing in short words. Now this is vestibular part, this is respiratory part, this is olfactory part. Now in these 3 parts, which is the largest? Respiratory part. The collapsing of respiratory part is prevented by how many concave? 3 concave. Here 3 concave. Here 3 concave. Totally 3 plus 3, 6 concave. Now here the first option. Find out the correct statement with respect to respiratory part. Now this is the respiratory part. The respiratory part is largest. In the respiratory part, how many concave? Concave also called turbinals. How many conchae? 3. Total number of conchae? 6. But here what is the first statement? It contains 4 conchae. That is the wrong statement. Second, this conchae are turbinals lined by the ciliated columnar epithelial cells. Each turbinal or conchae lined by ciliated columnar epithelium. Second statement correct. Third, this respiratory part acts as natural air conditioner. We are having a good idea regarding the cooler and next AC machine. While purchasing the cooler and AC machine, there we have to observe one heading, acclimatizer. What is meant by acclimatizer? Depending upon the environment, the working of cooler and AC machine changes. Now as we observe the respiratory part, during summer season, the hot air converted into cold air. In the winter season, cold air converted into hot air. That means depending upon the environment, the working of respiratory part changes. So it is a natural air conditioner or acclimatizer. So based on this, regarding the respiratory part, what are the correct statements? The second and third. Now we go for the next question. The effect of carbon dioxide and H plus concentration on oxygen accepting capacity of hemoglobin. Now we know very well, as we observe the oxygen transport, the oxygen is carried by hemoglobin. In all vertebrates, don't forget it, in all vertebrates, without RBC, there is no hemoglobin. But in case of invertebrates, just you have to remind regarding the annelida. In the annelida, though RBC absent, hemoglobin dissolved in the blood plasma. But in vertebrates, without RBC, there is no hemoglobin. Now the oxygen carried by hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is said to be oxygen carrier. One hemoglobin carries how many oxygen molecules? 4 oxygen molecules. Whenever the hemoglobin carries 4 oxygen molecules, the hemoglobin is said to be saturated. Here the student gets one doubt. What is meant by saturation? Nothing but maturation. If hemoglobin completely matures is also called saturation. Whenever the hemoglobin 100% saturated, it carries how many oxygen molecules? 4. If it is not fully saturated, it carries less than 4 oxygen molecules. They may be 3, they may be 2, they may be 1. And now, here the question is, the effect of carbon dioxide and H plus concentration on oxygen accepting capacity of hemoglobin. Now, in our body, suppose if more and more carbon dioxide is present, what is going to happen? You have to imagine. The carbon dioxide combines with the hemoglobin. So that whenever the carbon dioxide combines with the hemoglobin unable to carry oxygen to each and every cell. It means the transportation of oxygen by hemoglobin is influenced by carbon dioxide and H plus concentration. This concept explained by Bohr. Hence it is called Bohr effect. Now the answer is the second one. Now we go for the next question. Now the list 1 and list 2. 7% of carbon dioxide in the form of, you have to observe carefully the question. 7% of carbon dioxide in the form of FORM. B. 23% of carbon dioxide in the form of 3% of oxygen in the form of 70% of carbon dioxide in the form of. Now, as we observe the first one, oxygen. 3% of oxygen transported in the dissolved state, because the solubility property of oxygen is very less. 3% of oxygen transported in the dissolved state. Now we go for the carbon dioxide. 7% of carbon dioxide is transported in the form of H2CO3, carbonic acid. If much amount of carbon dioxide transported as H2CO3, what is going to happen? The pH decreases. That means acidity increases. Automatically, such increasing acidity leads to death of the cell. So, only 7% of carbon dioxide transported as H2CO3. Third, 23% of carbon dioxide transported as carb-amino compound. Carb-amino compound. It means, as we observe the carbon dioxide combines with the protein part of hemoglobin, we are getting carb-amino compound. Now here, this one is protein part. The carbon dioxide combines with the protein part of hemoglobin, we are getting the carb-amino compound. In this form, how much percentage is transported? 23. And 70% of carbon dioxide is transported as bicarbonates. What are the bicarbonates here? The potassium bicarbonate and sodium bicarbonate. This is only for the explanation part. Now in the main EAMCET examination, 70% of carbon dioxide transported in which form? Bicarbonates, that is correct. If in the options, one is potassium bicarbonate, one is sodium bicarbonate, both are correct. But out of these two, what is the more appropriate? Much amount of carbon dioxide transported as sodium bicarbonates. Now based on this information, what is the correct answer for this question is the third option. Now we go for the next question. Assertion. Percentage of saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen is high in lungs. Now students, we know very well. What are the lungs? The lungs are nothing but the respiratory organs. Now, at respiratory organs, the oxygen partial pressure is more. PP means partial pressure. At respiratory organs, oxygen partial pressure is more. Whenever oxygen partial pressure is more, automatically the oxygen combines with hemoglobin, we are getting the oxyhemoglobin. Now in the respiratory part, all these reactions are reversible reactions. So whenever partial pressure is more, the saturation is more. Whenever hemoglobin fully saturated, it carries 4 oxygen molecules. So whenever oxygen partial pressure is more, no doubt the saturation is more. Where partial pressure of oxygen is more? At respiratory organs, that means lungs. Now again you observe assertion. Percentage of saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen is high in lungs. So assertion is correct. R. Reason: respiratory organs in rabbit are with low carbon dioxide concentration and low temperature. So at respiratory organs, oxygen partial pressure is more, carbon dioxide partial pressure is less. So whenever the carbon dioxide partial pressure is less at respiratory organs, automatically the hemoglobin combines with oxygen. We are getting the oxyhemoglobin. Based on this information, both are correct. R explains A. Now we go for the next question. In the tissues, oxyhemoglobin dissociates and releases oxygen. Again repeating. In the tissues, the oxyhemoglobin dissociates and releases oxygen. A reason: at tissue level, the pH decreases due to increase of H plus ions. Now as we observe the graph, this one we call it as x-axis and y-axis. Now this is the left side of graph and this is the right side of graph. In order to explain the relation between oxygen and hemoglobin, we go oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. Now this is the sigmoid curve. Now in the beginning, the curve is present towards the left side. What are the conditions? The low temperature, the low carbon dioxide and high pH. Whenever these conditions are present, the oxygen combines with hemoglobin, we are getting the oxyhemoglobin. So whenever more oxyhemoglobin present, the curve is present towards left side. Now slowly the curve shifts towards right side. Now the curve moves towards right side. What are the conditions? The normal temperature, normal carbon dioxide, normal pH. Whenever these conditions are present, slowly from the oxyhemoglobin, what is going to release? Oxygen. Now again the curve shifts towards right side. Now what are the conditions? Here what are the conditions? That is high temperature, high carbon dioxide and low pH. So where low pH is present? In the tissues. So in the tissues, temperature more, carbon dioxide is more, pH is less. So from the oxyhemoglobin, what is releasing more and more? That is oxygen. So at low pH, from the oxyhemoglobin, what is dissociated? Oxygen. So the curve shifts from left to right. Now here assertion: in the tissues, oxyhemoglobin dissociates and releases oxygen. A reason: at tissues, the pH decreases because H plus concentration increases. So you observe the diagram. In the tissues, the pH is low. So at low pH, from the oxyhemoglobin, what is separating more and more? Oxygen. So both are correct. R explains A. Now we go for the next question. Chloride shift facilitates the transport of carbon dioxide as sodium bicarbonate in erythrocyte. Now again you observe the assertion. Chloride shift facilitates, that means helps. Chloride shift helps to transport carbon dioxide as sodium bicarbonate. Now this one we call it as RBC, already explained. The RBC is covered and protected by plasma lemma, and this is cytoplasm. In the cytoplasm, the water is present. The plasma membrane secretes carbonic anhydrase enzyme. Because of this enzyme, the carbon dioxide quickly combines with water. We are getting H2CO3. It is unstable. The H2CO3 immediately dissociates into H plus and HCO3 minus. Now you observe, in the RBC HCO3 present. First of all, HCO3 from RBC enters into plasma. Instead of that, from the plasma, the Cl minus enters into RBC. That is the chloride shift. First of all, from the RBC, HCO3 comes out. Later, Cl minus enters into the RBC. Here, you observe the reason. Exchange of Cl minus and HCO3 minus takes place between RBC, that means erythrocyte, and plasma respectively. You observe here the word respectively. First is Cl, next is HCO3, but it is wrong because first what will come out? HCO3 minus. Later what will enter into the RBC? Cl minus. But here what is given? First Cl, next HCO3. So automatically the reason is wrong. The A is correct. So the answer is the fourth one. A is true or is false. Now we go for the next question. Follow the statements regarding the lungs of rabbit. What are the statements given? Now as we observe the lungs in the mammals, this part we call it as trachea. The trachea divides into primary bronchi. Now the primary bronchus enters into the corresponding lung. Now each lung covered and protected by outer parietal layer and inner visceral layer. These two layers are pleural layers derived from mesoderm. Now first observe, the lungs are spongy. Now these two are spongy with 4 lobes in the left lung and 2 lobes in the right lung. But here in the left lung, how many lobes are present? 2. Now as we observe the right lung, in the right lung how many lobes are present? Now you observe the diagram. In the right lung, how many lobes? 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 plus 2. But here what is the first statement? Lungs are spongy, no doubt, with 4 lobes in the left. But in the left how many? 2. In the right how many? 4. So the first option is the wrong. Second, each lung is ensheathed by outer visceral, inner parietal. But what is the outer one? Parietal. Inner one is visceral. So the second one is eliminated, wrong. Third one, trachea, this part opens into lungs with the help of primary bronchi. Now the trachea opens into lungs by primary bronchi. So third statement correct. Fourth, the pleural fluid present in the pleural cavity between parietal and visceral layer, a space is present. The space is called pleural cavity. It is filled with pleural fluid that protects the lungs against friction and allows the free movement of lungs. So third statement, fourth statement are correct. Now we go for the next question. Choose the correct statements. First statement, respiratory part of nasal chamber. We already discussed. Now this one we call it as, what we call it as? Nasal chamber. In the nasal chamber, the first one is vestibular part. The second one is respiratory part. Third one is olfactory part. So out of these three, which is naturally air conditioner? The respiratory part. Now first statement, the respiratory part of nasal chamber acts as natural air conditioner. First statement correct. Larynx supported by 4 cartilaginous structures. Now this part is trachea. At the anterior end of trachea, here what is present? The larynx. The larynx is called voice box. The larynx is made by how many cartilages? 4 cartilages. One cartilage we call it as the thyroid. The second one we call it as arytenoids. And the next one we call it as cricoid. Now students, you have to observe number of thyroid cartilages 1, arytenoids 2, cricoid 1. So larynx is made by how many cartilages? 4. So the second is correct. Third, vocal cords are made of fibroelastic connective tissue. Now between ventral thyroid and arytenoids, what are present? 2 vocal cords. Now between the 2 vocal cords, what is present? The rima glottis, that is an opening. So whenever the air passes through rima glottis, now this is one vocal cord, another vocal cord. Between 2 vocal cords, a small opening, that is called rima glottis. Whenever the air passing through rima glottis, the vocal cords vibrate, the sound is produced. So the third statement is correct. The fourth one, extensive branching from trachea resembles inverted tree. Now this part we call it as the trachea. Trachea divides into primary bronchi. They divide into secondary bronchi. They divide into tertiary bronchi. Now they divide into primary bronchioles. They divide into secondary bronchioles. They divide into tertiary bronchioles. And they divide into terminal bronchioles. They divide into respiratory bronchioles. They open into alveolar duct. That opens into atrium. Now you observe this diagram. It appears to be inverted, the tree. So the fourth statement is also correct. Out of these, what is the wrong one? That is the first one. Now we go for the next. The next question. Now here, blood vessel which do not arise directly from the left systemic arch. Blood vessel which do not arise directly from the left systemic arch. Now this is the 4-chambered heart. This is right atrium. This is left atrium, right ventricle and left ventricle. Now from the anterior part of left ventricle, the left systemic arch arises. This is left systemic arch. The left systemic arch present only in case of mammals. Now from the base of left systemic arch, the coronary arteries arise. And this is a nameless artery, that is called innominate artery. Innominate artery, that is nameless artery. And this is left subclavian artery. Left subclavian artery. Now you observe, left subclavian artery arises from left systemic arch. Coronary arteries arise from left systemic arch. Innominate artery arises from left systemic arch. Now it divides into the right carotid artery, left carotid artery. Now from the base of right carotid artery, what will arise? The right subclavian artery. Now you observe the diagram. Here the right subclavian artery does not arise from the left systemic arch. It arises from the base of right carotid artery. Now here we observe blood vessel which do not arise directly from the left systemic arch. These are coronary arteries arise from left systemic arch. left subclavian artery arises from left systemic arch, innominate artery arises from the left systemic arch. What is the next one? Right subclavian artery that arises from the base of right carotid artery but not from the left systemic arch. Now we go for the next question. If the stroke volume of left ventricle is 70 ml in a mammal and number of beats per minute is 140, then what is the cardiac output of left ventricle in that animal? Now as we observe the working of heart, this is the cardiac output, COP. Cardiac output is equal to stroke volume into the number of the beats. Generally per minute number of beats 70 or 72. Now what is the stroke volume? The amount of blood pumped by ventricle. Number of ventricles 2. Each ventricle pumps how much amount of blood? 70 ml. Now here per minute number of beats 70 or 72. Here what they gave? The stroke volume of left ventricle is 70 ml. That means the left ventricle pumps how much amount of the blood? 70 ml. Now here number of heartbeats 140. Now we want the cardiac output 70 ml into 140. Now we are getting the what is the answer? 9800 ml per minute. So 70 ml into 140 beats. Now we go for the next question. Jugular anastomosis in rabbit occurs between. Now as we observe the venous system of rabbit. Now this one we call it as the right atrium. The right atrium receives impure blood from all anterior parts of the body with the help of the right precaval vein and left precaval vein. This is right precaval vein, left precaval vein. In the right precaval vein, what is present? External jugular vein. In the left precaval vein also what is present, students? External jugular vein. Now these two jugular veins connected by a transverse blood vessel. These two are connected by a transverse blood vessel. That we call it as jugular anastomosis. What is jugular anastomosis? It is a transverse blood vessel connects two jugular veins. External jugular vein of right precaval vein, external jugular vein of left precaval vein. Now the answer is the external jugular veins. Now we go for the next question. How many blood vessels supply blood to liver and how many blood vessels come out from the liver? Here generally the students are doing one mistake. Now this part we call it as diaphragm. Below diaphragm what is present? The 5-lobed liver is present. You have to observe the diagram. This is the liver. In case of mammals, how many lobes? 5 lobes. Now, what are the blood vessels supply blood to liver? One answer is the hepatic artery. And the second answer is the hepatic portal vein. So, how many blood vessels supply blood to liver? 2. Now, from the liver, the blood is collected by how many hepatic veins? These are hepatic veins. Now, how many hepatic veins? 4 or 2 pairs. Now, here, as we observe the question, how many blood vessels supply blood to liver and how many blood vessels take away? That means from the liver, The blood is taken away by how many blood vessels? 4. So number of hepatic veins 4. Number of arteries supply blood to liver 2. So 2 plus 4 6. Now the answer is the third one 2 and 4. Now we go for the next question. Now you observe the question. The vein associated with the right precaval and absent in the left precaval. Now as we observe the venous system, this is the right precaval vein and this is the left precaval vein. The right precaval vein, it is formed by the fusion of 6 veins. One among them is azygos. The azygos open into right precaval vein. Here towards left side azygos absent. So name the vein that opens into right precaval vein but not into the left precaval vein, azygos. Azygos, that is unpaired, only one. Now here the vein associated with right precaval and absent in the left precaval. One is internal jugular vein present in both, external jugular vein present in both, subclavian present in both, azygos present only on the right side but absent on the left side. The answer is the third one, that is azygos vein. Azygos vein. Correct answer is azygos, not external jugular vein. The correct answer is azygos. Now we go for the next question. Total number of valves associated with, students you have to observe the question. Total number of valves associated with heart of rabbit. Now the total number of valves associated with heart of rabbit. Now as we observe the heart, now this one we call it as the right atrium, left atrium, and next right ventricle, left ventricle. Now this is the right precaval vein, this is the left precaval vein, this is the right precaval vein, and this is the postcaval vein. Now the opening of right precaval vein is guarded by a valve that we call it as sebaceous valve 1. Now in the embryonic stage, the opening of precaval vein is guarded by eustachian valve. The right atrium opens into right ventricle through an aperture. Here one valve is present. The left atrium opens into left ventricle through an aperture. It is guarded by one valve. It is tricuspid valve 1. This is bicuspid valve, that is 1. Now from the right atrium what will arise? The pulmonary arch. At the base of pulmonary arch, how many semilunar valves? 3. And this is left systemic arch. At its base, how many semilunar valves? 3. Now semilunar valves 3. Semilunar valves 3. Now you have to count. Semilunar valves 3 plus 3 6. Bicuspid valve 1. Tricuspid valve 1. Eustachian valve 1. And sebaceous valve 1. Total number of valves associated with the heart 10. Now we go for the next question. Transverse anastomosis. What is meant by anastomosis? That is a blood vessel. How it is arranged? Transversely. Now you observe the diagram. Now this is 4-chambered heart. And this is right one, left and left. And this is the right precaval. This is left precaval. Now towards right side what is present? azygous. This is called azygous. Okay, students? The azygous, that is unpaired. Now, towards left side, a small blood vessel is present, that we call it as hemizygous. What is meant by hemi? Part. Only a small blood vessel, that is called hemizygous. The hemizygous open into azygous through a transverse blood vessel, that we call it as the transverse anastomosis. In the last bit what we discussed, jugular anastomosis, the two external jugular veins connected by jugular anastomosis. Here hemizygous opens into azygous by a transverse blood vessel called transverse anastomosis. Now we go for the next question. Assertion. The heart of mammals is called myogenic heart. Now the heart of mammals is called myogenic heart. Now this one we call it as the four-chambered heart. Now this dot indicates the SA node and this dot indicates AV node. Okay, students? Now the heart is made by what type of muscle? The cardiac muscle tissue. Now SA node, AV node, the two nodes are made by what type of muscle tissue? Cardiac muscle tissue. And now the heartbeat is started by SA node. This is the pacemaker. So in case of mammals, the heart is myogenic because the heartbeat under the control of muscle tissue. Here what is the muscle tissue? Cardiac muscle tissue. That cardiac muscle tissue is in the form of SA node, AV node. Here what is the pacemaker? SA node. So assertion, heart of mammals is called myogenic heart. For this assertion, what is the correct reason? The heartbeat under the control of muscle tissue. But here what is the reason? The two ventricles separated by interventricular septum. Now these are two ventricles. Now as we observe the ventricles, the two ventricles are separated by a oblique septum, that is called interventricular septum. So A and R are correct, but R does not explain CA. Now we go for the next question. Assertion. Calcium ion removers are used in storing the blood in the blood banks. Now, as we observe the blood banks, in the blood banks, the blood is stored for some time. But what is the property of the blood? As long as blood is present in the blood vessel, it does not coagulate due to the presence of heparin. Once we are getting injury, the blood vessel is cut off, the blood oozes. Within 3 to 6 minutes, the blood is going to coagulate. That is the property of the blood. But as we observe the blood banks, in the blood banks for 15 to 20 days, the blood is stored in the fluid state. How it is stored? Now, in the blood banks, the blood is mixed with the artificial anticoagulants. What are the artificial anticoagulants? The sodium oxalate and sodium citrate. Now, in order to store the blood in the blood banks, the blood is mixed with artificial anticoagulants. One is sodium oxalate, one is sodium citrate. Whenever the blood is mixed with these artificial anticoagulants, what is going to happen? In the blood, the calcium ions inactivate, because for the coagulation of blood, what is required? Calcium ions. If they are inactivated, there is no process of blood coagulation. The blood is in the fluid state. Now you observe the assertion. Calcium ion removers are used in storing the blood in blood banks. That is correct. Reason, the calcium, that is a fourth factor. In order to coagulate blood, how many factors are required? 13. How many? 13. In the 13, recently what is omitted? The sixth factor. But anyhow, how many factors are required? 13. In the 13 factors, what is the fourth one? The calcium ions. The calcium ions play in the extrinsic, intrinsic way to coagulate the blood. So both are correct. R explains A. Now we go for the next question. Find wrongly quoted among the following statements regarding the veins in rabbit. Now we observe the first statement. Blood in hepatic veins contain more amount of urea. Now this part we call it as the liver. From the liver, these are called the hepatic veins. How many hepatic veins? 4. Now in the liver, what is going to take place? Ornithine cycle. Because of the ornithine cycle, what will be obtained? The urea. So as we observe the hepatic veins, in the blood of hepatic veins, what is present? Urea. Now we observe the first statement. Blood in the hepatic vein contains more amount of urea. So the statement is correct. Second, blood in the renal vein contains less amount of urea. Now in our body, this part we call it as the kidney. Now from each kidney, what will arise? The renal veins. Number of renal veins? 2 in number. Now the blood in the renal veins containing the small amount of urea. Now the second one is blood in the renal vein contains less amount of urea. So the second statement is also correct. Third, blood in hepatic portal vein. Now as we observe, this is the liver and this one we call it as the alimentary canal. In the alimentary canal, one part is, this is intestine. What is the connecting link between intestine and the liver? That we call it as hepatic portal vein. Now in the intestine, the digestion completed. After completing the digestion, the blood absorbs the digested food materials. So the blood which is present in the hepatic portal vein contains more amount of nutrients. One example is glucose. Now the third statement, blood in the hepatic portal vein contains more amount of glucose. So first 3 statements are correct. Automatically the fourth one is wrong. That is, the blood in pulmonary veins contain more amount of carbon dioxide. Pulmonary veins arise from lungs. So in the pulmonary veins blood, what is more? Oxygen, but not the carbon dioxide. So the fourth statement is wrong. Now we go for the next statement.